At 19:30, warning sirens tore across Brest as 5 Russian drones crossed into one of Europe's most tightly guarded military zones, heading straight for the base that protects France's strategic submarine fleet. Moscow likely believed it had just embarrassed the force de frappe and exposed one of NATO's most critical strongholds. That assumption would prove to be a serious miscalculation. At 1932, Brest's coastal surveillance network picked up something that should not have been there. Conventional radar was struggling against the Atlantic haze, but passive electronic support sensors, listening silently through the noise, detected the distinct 2.4 gigahertz signature of 5 hostile aircraft. They were moving at around 80 knots, just 200 feet above the water. Within seconds, Ile-Longue shifted from a quiet naval stronghold to a full alert defense zone. By 1933, the targets were identified. French counter-drone units locked high-definition thermal cameras onto them from 15 kilometers away. What appeared on the screens were not hobbyist quadcopters, but the unmistakable triangular outlines of Russian Orlan 10 reconnaissance drones, their engines glowing at a steady 40 degrees Celsius. Localized jamming was deployed immediately, yet the drones showed no reaction. These were not being guided manually. They were running on pre-programmed autonomous routes, a coordinated drone formation built to survey the docking areas of France's strategic submarines. The Russian approach was carefully designed. By flying only 200 feet above the sea, the drones used the rough terrain of the Brittany coastline and the dense Atlantic fog to stay below the reach of long-range radar. They shifted left and right every 15 seconds, imitating the irregular motion of sea clutter and confusing French tracking systems. The objective was as simple as it was alarming: build a precise 3D model of the French SSBN pens. Each camera pass was intended to record launch tube positions, dock layouts, and security patrol patterns, while transmitting high-resolution intelligence to a support vessel waiting far offshore. This was not a direct attack. It was a deep reconnaissance probe, gathering the kind of information that could undermine Europe's strategic deterrent without a single shot being fired. The operators believed they were invisible, using geography, weather, and timing to make NATO look helpless. What they did not realize was that they were already entering a highly controlled electronic trap. At 2000, the balance shifted. NATO stopped reacting and took control of the engagement. In a move that looked almost unreal, French radar stations and naval defense systems suddenly went silent. To the operators guiding the mission from offshore, it appeared the defenses had gone dark. In reality, the picture had only changed form. High above the area, a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon began executing a GPS spoofing operation. Rather than physically bringing the drones down, it transmitted a false navigation signal so precise and convincing that the drone's onboard systems accepted it as genuine. Their computers concluded that their recovery point had shifted 50 miles into the empty Atlantic. It was the digital equivalent of redirecting an intruder away from the exit and into open ocean while he believes he is still on course. Within 2 minutes, the Orlan 10s made a clean 180-degree turn. Their mission over the submarine base ended instantly, and they began flying toward an empty point at sea. Then the situation became even more complex. A sixth contact appeared on the Poseidon systems, a high-altitude, long-endurance drone, likely operated by a third party, possibly from China, using the confusion to test the environment for itself. Unlike the first 5, this platform activated a powerful broadband electronic jammer, attempting to disrupt both French defenders and the American aircraft overhead. The standoff had become a 3-way electronic contest. The U.S. response was precise and controlled. The P-8A did not launch a missile. Instead, it employed a directed energy system, focusing a burst of high-power microwave energy directly at the intruding drone's communications array. From 500 meters away, the beam disabled the platform's electronics in about 15 seconds. There was no explosion and no fireball, just an expensive aircraft abruptly turning into dead weight before dropping into the dark Atlantic. The jamming ceased. The airspace fell quiet again. By 2015, the Atlantic darkness was no longer protecting the intruders. It was exposing them. The P-8A Poseidon, now acting like a digital tracking hound, began tracing the signal chain back to its source. Every automated status transmission from the spoofed Orlan drones revealed a little more. Using passive sensing and precision interferometry, the American crew triangulated the emissions in under 5 minutes. The trail led to a dark section of water roughly 100 nautical miles offshore, hidden among international shipping lanes. There, disguised as an ordinary commercial trawler, sat the Russian mothership. To the naked eye, it looked tired and harmless, just another vessel riding the swell. To the Poseidon systems, it lit up with concealed satellite dishes, signal arrays, and drone control equipment. But there was more. About 20 miles beyond it, sensors picked up a second vessel. Sleeker, unmarked, technologically advanced, and running quiet. This was no longer a single-state operation. It looked increasingly like a broader test of NATO's response around one of Europe's most sensitive strategic sites. The answer came in the form of pure psychological pressure. A U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, which had been shadowing the area in radar silence, suddenly revealed itself. At 2020, its powerful searchlights snapped on, flooding the Russian vessel with blinding white light. In an instant, the trawler went from hidden observer to fully exposed target. Then came the radio call. On international VHF Channel 16, a calm American voice addressed the vessel, first in fluent Russian, then in Mandarin. The message was direct. Their aerial assets had been neutralized, their electronic signatures recorded, and their position fixed for simulated strike targeting. They were instructed to alter course immediately and leave the area. It was not a negotiation. It was a clear demonstration that the entire operation had been mapped, contained, and countered. Moments later, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter dropped low out of the clouds. It did not remain at a comfortable distance. It hovered just 50 feet above the water, its rotor wash tearing across the sea surface and blasting the Russian deck with spray. Its targeting optics remained fixed on the vessel's bridge, while onboard warning systems on the trawler would have made it very clear that they were being actively tracked. The second unmarked ship did not wait for its own turn under the spotlight. After watching the Russian support vessel get exposed both physically and electronically, it accelerated hard and disappeared toward the horizon at high speed. No missile had been launched, no conventional round had been fired. Yet by 2030, the operation had completely unraveled. The Russian trawler pulled back, its antennas folded away, its engines powered up, and it began a visibly hurried withdrawal, shadowed by the Seahawk above and the destroyer nearby. What began as an attempt to quietly map the core of France's strategic deterrent ended in a very public retreat. They came to probe the heart of steel in Brest. They left with a blunt lesson. Over the Atlantic approaches to NATO's most sensitive assets, the alliance was not blind, passive, or slow. It was patient, layered, and in total control of the electronic battlefield. The operation failed. The message was unmistakable, and the third party watching from the edge of the fight learned the same lesson at the same time. What happened over Brest was not just a success of ships and aircraft. It was a demonstration of integrated warfare systems working at full precision. Aegis Baseline 10, together with French coastal networks and the P-8A's surveillance suite, fused information from multiple domains: low-orbit satellites, underwater acoustic arrays, passive electronic sensors, and airborne tracking platforms into a single operational picture. The system did not merely detect the drones. It identified their electronic fingerprints in real time and projected their behavior before the operators behind the mission could react. And then there was the quietest part of the entire response: the use of high-power microwave systems. Around a strategic submarine base, bringing down hostile aircraft with explosive intercepts carries obvious risks. Burning debris is the last thing anyone wants falling near sensitive military infrastructure. Directed energy offered a cleaner option. From more than a kilometer away, concentrated microwave energy can overload and destroy critical electronics without visible impact. No dramatic blast, no smoke trail, just a sudden systems failure and a silent fall into the sea. That is what makes this kind of response so effective. It is controlled, precise, and deeply unsettling for the side on the receiving end, because from their perspective, a multi-million-dollar platform can simply stop functioning without warning. And that leads to the real question: what if the mission had not been stopped in time? But imagine for a moment that this was never meant to be a reconnaissance run. Imagine those 5 drones were only the opening wave of a real strike, designed to cripple France's nuclear deterrent in one sudden blow. In that scenario, NATO's reaction would not remain limited for long. It would shift from controlled interception to complete neutralization in well under 90 seconds. Along the shoreline at Ile Longue, close-in defense systems would come alive immediately. Radar-guided naval guns would begin firing at an extraordinary rate, building a barrier of metal so dense that no incoming drone, no matter how agile, could cross it intact. The Orlan platforms would be torn apart before they ever reached the perimeter of the base. And the response would not end at the coast. While the P-8A handled the airborne threat, a Virginia-class attack submarine could already be waiting below the surface, silent, hidden, and in position. At the first confirmed sign of an actual strike, it would not need a dramatic warning. It would move to engage the support vessels coordinating the attack. Torpedoes launched from long range would turn the mothership from a command platform into wreckage before its crew had time to understand what was happening. That is the real message behind a scenario like this. If someone tries to hit the core of NATO's strategic shield, they are not risking a minor setback. They are risking total mission failure in an instant. And that is why the deeper lesson here matters so much. NATO's restraint should not be mistaken for uncertainty, and certainly not for weakness. It looked measured because it was measured. France and the United States chose not to rush into an overt strike because they did not need to. By letting the drones continue just far enough, by allowing the support vessels to reveal themselves, they demonstrated something even more intimidating than raw firepower, complete control of the situation. They did not simply block the intrusion, they shaped it. The drones were subtly redirected, contained, and funneled into a prepared surveillance environment where every signal, every movement, and every autonomous decision could be analyzed in real time. The operators behind the mission were allowed just enough freedom to feel confident, just enough room to commit themselves fully before realizing that the entire sequence had already been anticipated. They were not operating freely. They were being observed, measured, and managed from the moment they entered the battle space. That is what dominance in the gray zone really looks like. It is not only about weapons. It is about controlling tempo, pressure, perception, and escalation. It is about deciding whether a confrontation stays below the threshold of open conflict or crosses it, and making sure that decision belongs to you, not your opponent. What France and the United States showed in this scenario is that modern deterrence is no longer just about missiles, submarines, or warships. It is about owning the invisible layers of the conflict space: sensors, signals, timing, deception, and response options. The intruders were shown just enough to understand one unmistakable fact. If this had been a real war, the outcome would already have been decided. The flypaper trap concept works precisely because it turns confidence into exposure. Instead of reacting too early, it allows the other side to step deeper into a controlled space until retreat becomes their only option. That makes it more than a tactical success. It becomes a message. So was NATO too restrained? Not likely. A direct strike would have ended the encounter faster, but it would also have revealed less. What happened here sent a broader signal. Not only can NATO stop this kind of operation, it can map it, manipulate it, and end it on its own terms. That kind of message lingers much longer than a simple shoot-down. The future of drone warfare will likely belong to the side that can see first, interpret fastest, and disrupt cleanly. In that kind of contest, the most powerful move is not always the loudest one. Sometimes the strongest response is the one that leaves the other side fully exposed, fully embarrassed, and fully aware that they were never in control.